Hi, he's MADMAN.
And he's Vanny Boy. And you're listening to The Rusty Playground, a Gen X-centric podcast regarding all things Gen X, the coolest generation.
The coolest generation. All right, so for tonight's episode, we're going to stick our toes into one of the creepiest, weirdest, best shows of all time for Gen Xers out there, In Search Of. In Search Of was, I guess the closest thing we have to it now is like Ancient Aliens, but they didn't
I was going to say, compared to like every cable documentary of the last 25 years, they're all taking a beat from what they did.
Yeah, that's true. Anything that's sensational, offbeat, anything that's like aliens, Bigfoot, monsters, ghosts,
Loch Ness Monster,
anything like that. Yeah, this is what
water,
this show is
serpents. About. Yes.
Yeah. They had I believe it was three different versions of it. They had one that came on NBC from 1975 to 81, 82. Yeah. And that was the original.
I did see some of these other ones like on the YouTubes. I did not watch them though.
Yeah. So
Go ahead.
So ironically, the original 144 was hosted by Leonard Nimoy, who obviously everyone knows as Mr. Spock. And then when they had a reboot of it in the early 2000s on the Sci-Fi Channel, they had Zachary Quintos, who also played Mr. Spock in the movies.
Oh, I did not even think about that. Wow.
Yeah. And so this was a show that was very creepy. You got to remember, 75, MADMAN and I are like between 5 and 6 years old. And these things would come on. And as we'll point out later, they were pretty dark. Sometimes creepy. I mean, there's never any like.
Well, let's face it; these were actually for an adult audience. They were not during the kids' hour.
Absolutely, because I've a few of them that I saw. I was like, damn, it's hard to imagine that. I was 6 years, 7 years, 8 years old watching this, and could ever go to sleep. I'm still not going to sleep. I was so scared.
It's like Leonard Nimoy. On August 17th, Roger Winters was anally probed. I mean, that's not.
Yeah. So,
it's no, we don't have that.
We'll be right back after this commercial. Hey, you want any Cracker Jack? Bad. So like we're saying, it's super creepy. Even ones that the subject matter themselves weren't necessarily creepy. Like, for example, they'd had an episode on Nazi plunder and how, they're tracking down all the Nazi plunder that they could find. And
let me guess, they found none.
Ironically, it was in Al Capone's vault. So that's
Geraldo was there too, and he
this was right after he left. All he had to do was open that one door, and he just found all this Nazi plunder. Dumbass.
Yeah.
But and they had one on like Amelia.
Was it in Lemmy's apartment? Sorry.
Oh God.
He collected Nazi memorabilia, for those who did not know, but he was not a Nazi. He was a cool guy. He just found it just
probably
morbidly fascinating, I think.
Yes. Lemmy Kilmister is funny enough, I guess, if you've listened to these, a couple of our past one, maybe even the last one, not sure, but where we talk about that, where like Ozzy Osbourne and Lemmy Kilmister and a few others were, collect Nazi memorabilia, not because they're Nazis, but because it's fascinating. And they had a great design aesthetic. I mean, if you take away the World War and cold-blooded murder,
they didn't have any good ideas other than some of their aesthetics in design. But
they were good at that. I'll give them that. I was a graphic artist, did all this history. But regardless,
cinematographers would probably agree with that as the triumph of the will and whatnots.
A little touch on Lemmy Kilmister here.
But yes,
I saw an interview with him where they asked him. He was like reading stuff. This was on MTV. He was reading fan letters, and one kid wrote him and said that he's a black kid and he listens to hard rock, heavy metal, and his friends around him and stuff are like, you're a race traitor and you're not, what's wrong with you and all this. how does he handle it? And Lemmy was like, good on you, man. Fuck those people. So if he was a Nazi, he would have been like, we don't need your kind listening to our music. So
Yes. But once again, how we got on this, I can't even remember. But
you brought up
I did.
Lemmy?
I went there. I said something about Lemmy. But anyway, he got that knife. One of his knives he got from Keith Emerson.
Yeah.
Because he was a roadie briefly for...
He gave it to Keith Emerson.
Keith Emerson gave it to him. He used it, or I guess you're right. I think you were right. I think he gave it to Keith Emerson, who was using it. He would jam it in his organ.
Give it that crazy sound, yeah.
To get that crazy sound, yes. Because for a brief period, Lemmy was a roadie for the Nice, which was the band Keith was in before, the band with his name in it. What were we talking about again?
We were talking about In Search Of. So,
oh yes,
just to set it up for the folks.
Okay, sorry.
Like I said, it didn't. They weren't all creepy. They did have creepy music, and frankly, Leonard Nimoy himself was kind of creepy in a way, and certainly his delivery on this. And it was the 70s, so the big ass collars, and it was all creepy.
And like poorly lit.
Yes.
On all their recreations.
Yeah.
I don't know what I'm looking at.
But so some of the episodes, we've picked out several that we'll talk about and kind of give you a breakdown of what an average episode was like. But they definitely had...
I'm pulling up my notes now, by the way.
Oh, cool. No, you're doing by memory. Don't tell them. They don't need to know how the sausage is made, Matt.
Yeah. I'm a professional. Not in this. I'm in IT.
Yeah. So they'd have like the Bermuda Triangle, right? Which, people would say is, why do so many disappear there or whatever? They have Bigfoot, killer bees, and then they'd have one on earthquakes. So there's nothing like creepy about that. That's just pretty informative, to be honest. Mummy's Curse. I mean, silly, right? And Martians. And I'll scroll way down here. Pyramid Secrets. Hey, there's a second one.
It's all the stuff that like millennials probably saw secondhand on like 90s and early 2000s cable documentaries that were trash documentaries.
Yeah.
They're just rehashing the same stuff.
This was the granddaddy
of this. It. This was the one, yes.
If you listened to hard rock and heavy metal, this is Black Sabbath, basically, for you.
Yes.
And so I enjoyed, to be honest, our last episode we had on Sid and Marty Krofft, and going through a lot of the, just looking at the old kids shows that we watched from that time period was like pulling teeth. It was so hard to watch. It was terrible. And I was forcing myself to watch it, but this, I enjoyed them. And, the thing that took most of the time for me was, I take extensive notes. So, that was it. So I couldn't like just watch it while I'm painting on another monitor or whatever. I have to pay attention and write the notes. So it was cool.
Good on you. I would have liked to seen you like just putting notes on a canvas, just using your paint brushes. I'm just going to incorporate this into the painting.
Yes. Yeah.
That makes sense to me later.
All my painting's creepy. So, like we said, this show lasted quite a few years. It left an indelible mark on any of the Gen Xers, because we couldn't just go to YouTube and look up, like witch doctors or anything. We had to wait.
This was the first, like, really, like, wow, they're dealing with all the far out stuff that you may have seen only briefly. Like there were some library books and whatnot. I remember in elementary school about ancient astronauts and things like that. But this was the first TV show that really just gave you that first like multimedia treatment. Yeah, they truly, they definitely put money into it for, they just didn't have CGI or anything like that. No.
Like they'd have one that was, some of them you watch, and at the time as kids that were not supposed to be watching it, you could be like, wow, that's fascinating. But as a grown man, I'm like, some of this was just total bullshit. The man that would not die and stuff like that. Or they do the, also there's been like 50 years since this came out. So we have a lot more information on some of the things that
Yes.
they
But it is
discussed.
interesting some of the things that 50 years later, they still don't friggin' know.
Yeah.
Which is one of the ones I watch, which I'll get into.
Okay, cool.
But later.
Yeah.
You
We'll
keep
just
talking. I'm
okay.
color commentary.
So they'd have one like on witch doctors, for example, and they don't approach it from the well, this is horse shit. You know,
Yeah.
the beginning of the episodes, the opening part, it says this series presents information based in part on theory and conjecture. The producer's purpose is to propose some kind of explanation, but not necessarily the only ones to the mysteries we will examine. And I'm
I
like,
think I respected that the most, that they
yeah,
even at least say that.
yeah, I did too. Because
Yeah.
they're like, hey, some of this is kind of pretty far out there, and but this
Nowadays,
could
it's
be an
like
answer.
it would be the credits flipping by, and you know how that in recent, well, not even recent years, God, 20 some years now, they like minimize the credits of the show you were watching,
Right.
so you don't even get to see where it says this is just kind of a guess
Yeah,
that they put in the end credits nowadays.
there's a movie that Riff Tracks does that stars Leslie Nielsen before he was Airplane. Before people knew he was a
Is this the
com-
Forbidden Planet?
comedic genius. No, that's something. It's about uh, basically the ozone layer disappearing, and so they're going camping, and as they go up the mountain higher up, they and everything else, all the animals are affected adversely, become more aggressive and stuff. And at the beginning, it says this is a theory of what could happen in nature due to the changes to the ozone layer. So it was they were telling you flat out, hey, this is not necessarily real, but it's a cautionary tale. And then Mike Nelson mentions it's nice that they did that because nowadays you could have a movie about a werewolf in a space capsule and it'd be like based on a true story, so
Yeah, or inspired by a true story.
yeah. So
I like to know the inspiration
yeah. um,
more than what I just took.
right, yeah. So they did have things like, for example, I'm just scrolling down this list that's on
Yeah,
their wiki. So they have Butch
yeah,
Cassidy. Butch Cassidy was a real person, and their point of view was this examines the possibility that Butch Cassidy was not killed in Bolivia along with the Sundance Kid, but actually lived a full life and died peacefully in 1937. Now that
uh,
is an actual theory that has some legs to it. I think that
but that was like 50 years ago.
yeah,
So have like more people sided with that, or more people have said no, we upon further eval, no, that's not even a thing.
well, I wonder if we looked it up now, if somebody's gone through taken a picture of the guy that says he was Butch Cassidy and then take a picture of actual Butch Cassidy. And then they can now with computers just
Yeah,
match it like, yes, this is definitely him, even though it's, 50 years later or whatever. So,
yeah,
funny enough, this was when this episode came out, it was closer to 1937 than it is now.
yeah. I
Isn't
know
that wild? And
it
I was
always is. Yes.
it blew my mind one day. I was talking to Christina, my wife, and she's 42 now, so she's younger than I am. And we joke about my
You
decrepit age.
think no?
and and I was like, it dawned on me that I'm only 15 years younger than rock and roll. I mean,
Oh
it's
yeah.
just
Oh
we're we were born 15 years after rock and roll started, and a lot of rock changed a whole lot between basically
yeah.
1955 and 1969. But it
Well,
just
my God. I mean, just between 50. I mean, maybe one of the earliest is like from 1954, but between 54 to 1960, it sounds vastly different.
yeah, you had Elvis and Little Richard and all them. That was this influx of black music and culture that had been pushed away and hidden, obviously, and then that became
Yeah.
mainstream, and then so of course they had to
I
change it.
feel like, even with like Buddy Holly, I mean, what he was doing was much different than what the rockabilly guys were doing,
Yeah,
or Sun Records was doing like 4 or 5 years before that.
yeah, and it wasn't long after that when, the Beatles hit the scene. So,
Yes.
by comparison, but we digress yet
Yeah.
again.
Again.
We like music, people. So it's,
Yeah, we love music.
so
Music is the best. That's what
yeah,
Frank Zappa said, and I maintain that.
yeah. And Dumbledore once said, music, a magic beyond anything we do here at Hogwarts. And I go with that. So anyway, that's the kind of thing this was. This was like Maddie was saying, you can go on what is now the quote unquote Discovery Channel and quote unquote Learning Channel
I know.
and see this kind of stuff.
I know. It's like, well, there's a term actually for these cable channels. I can't remember the exact, but it's like creepage in a way
Creepage.
where it kind of like drifts. I can't remember what exact term, but it drifts away from its original intent, objective.
Yes. And it did. Because when
And so
Discovery first came out, we actually learned a lot of stuff from Discovery.
right. And the History Channel was, about history, and it wasn't even all about Hitler, although later people started joking it's the Hitler Channel.
Right.
And then later it became like ice truckers.
Yeah.
Like, this is like current.
Right. This has.
Are they skewing it to like history in the making? I don't know.
I never even heard it say that. They just changed.
No, they didn't. I'm just saying that was my take on it. Is that how they're letting this slip into like a History Channel?
And we had History Channel had biography on it. Remember, I think Discovery had it too, and it kind of went to History Channel, and then they made so many of those. It started out like biography on the most influential man to ever live, Jesus of Nazareth, all the way down. 4 years later, it's like on
biography, Andy Dick.
Yeah, right. Barbara Mandrell. It's like no offense, Barbara, but
they were every A-lister.
They were literally running out of people to talk about.
Yeah.
If you want to be on biography, send us a letter.
I was going to say next month. Ben Burnett.
Hey, everybody.
Vanny Boy.
They brought up as a
Vanny Boy.
So this one that I'm looking at right here came out in November of 1978, and it's called Monster Hunters. That's what it was about. Leonard Nimoy investigates what compels scientists and teachers to pursue a man-like beast.
But let's face it, we're in a whole lot of legitimate ones actually doing that. There's always a fringe person.
Yeah, doctor meaning like a podiatrist who's interested in Bigfoot.
Yeah, right.
It's crazy, and then some sensational ones. Obviously, lots of UFO stuff, but the Amityville Horror, which was total bullshit. And at this point, people didn't know this, but it was later, like I think in the early 2000s, maybe mid 2000s. That the family came out and was like, yeah, we made it all up, and everybody in the world was like, yeah, no shit, Sherlock. So,
but those investigators, that husband wife duo, they went for it.
Right. Yeah. They had one on, like, for example, the lost colony of Roanoke Island, which was a real thing, a real place, a real mystery. And I think, thankfully, so this is so many years later, it's 1979. So they're like, nobody knows. They just disappeared. And
even though there was something that they etched on a pole.
Yeah. Croatoa.
Yeah.
And
it tells you where they went.
Yeah. Yes. And thanks to DNA evidence, I believe they've proven now that the whites went into the Indians and then they just accepted them and they bred together, and so you find the Croatoan Indians or whatever they are, and have them.
They have distinct genotypes.
Yeah. So they pretty much know what that is. A long time ago. I
was going to say. All right, you go ahead, and then I'll get back to it. Sorry,
it's all right. I was just going to say, like, the Shroud of Turin. And it's always been a mystery. Does it really hold is it really the burial cloth of Jesus? Is it really the image that you have that is a negative? Was it made in the Dark Ages, or is it real? And recently they came out with showing that, hey, this is a lot of evidence to say this thing's real. Actually, the type of fiber or whatever it degrades at a certain time period, and it basically goes back to the first century. So it goes back that far. So it's not saying it is, but my point is my point is that that's information that they did not have.
Well, the other thing is I've not been keeping up track of like the latest research, but at one point I remember they carbon dated it to like only the 1300s. So
Yeah, and
so there's a lot of back and forth.
Well, the what they did, unfortunately, when they carbon dated it, was they took a piece that was like off the edge that had been repaired during a fire in the 14th century or whatever it was.
Mhm.
So I don't know why they didn't take one that they knew was, hey, this is a little closer in. I mean,
Okay.
obviously, if it is the real thing, then it's an unbelievably amazing find.
Yeah.
So
Well,
they don't want to just be every 20 years they have new technology and cutting another piece out of it. But anyway, regardless, they
Yeah.
had, they have new technology to prove that thing. The Roanoke colony, new technology to prove it. So it's
Bigfoot, we know that's not real.
yeah, Bigfoot's horse shit. And
I mean, I'm not saying it's impossible, but everything they've shown that was supposedly was the evidence of later was no, that wasn't, and that
Right.
was faked, and this was faked.
Yeah, yeah, and nowadays with I saw Neil deGrasse Tyson. I saw him talking on TV, and he's he's jumped the shark for me for the most part because he's great at astronomy. He's brilliant at that. That's what he does for a living.
Yeah, astrophysics or whatever.
Astrophysics. Yeah, he's so because he's great at that, he's smart. He now is an expert at everything, right? So
right, I got you.
Yeah. So, but anyway, he said he had a good point, which is with alien abductions. Back in the day, it was you got an alien abduction. Do you have any evidence of it? No, but it happened and all this stuff. But now everybody has a phone in their pocket, and everyone around them has a phone in their pocket. So like where are the pictures of someone being pulled up into a spaceship? Yeah. It's not that there aren't aliens, but that's just you have to ask that question. Same thing with Bigfoot.
Yeah, absolutely. But yes. So how do you want to handle it now? What's our framework?
All right. So now that we've set that up in a long-winded way, I think what we'll do is I'll start out with my first one, and then you'll do yours, then I'll do mine, then yours, mine, yours, mine, yours. All right. And then I also I got in the mail the other day. It was a little audio file that was inside of a USB thing, a thumb drive, and I haven't heard it, but it said "Attention, Vanny Boy," and it looked really old, like 50 years old, and the stamp on it was from 50 years ago, and I thought,
what?
Yeah. I thought it was, it's got to be a joke. I haven't heard it, but when you open it up, so it says to Vanny Boy, and then when you open it up, it has "In Search Of," which is why I was inspired to say, hey, Maddie, you want to do "In Search Of," and then we'll listen to this audio file together, see what it is. It might be nothing, might be, an old, it might be Van Halen 1 for all I know, but we'll check it out.
I mean, yeah, that's what you have. You happen to have a previous released master of like a demo they were working on of "You Really Got Me" or something. Yeah,
right.
Okay.
It was a thumb drive
and you
from
would
50 years ago before the album was actually made.
Exactly. Well, that would make sense because they were making it. And they said, hey, this 7-year-old will give us some input because I know one day he'll be our biggest fan.
Yes. His name is Van.
And it's not because of us, but because I wasn't around in '69 to influence his parents' decision, but I would have.
Well, absolutely. So
sheer will.
So for me, the first one that I picked, now folks, I did this, literally went online and was like, because there's like 144 episodes, I was like, give me a random number between 1 and 144. So that's how I pretty much came up with which ones I'm going to view and then which ones that Maddie's going to talk about. There were some that it landed on and I was like, yeah, that's not going to be very interesting. And then so I would drop those. So the ones I've kind of randomly cherry picked, if that made any sense. So
I guess.
Yeah.
Whatever, man.
So the first one I chose was episode 10, and it was for May 22nd, 1977, and it was about Atlantis.
Oh, I love those. I
Yeah.
loved so much when I was a kid reading about Atlantis and the same old like Plato mentions Atlantis, but I'm sure you'll get into that.
Yes, yes. So
Yeah.
the episode starts off with just showing like Easter Island and other ancient monoliths and sites and stuff like that. That we know a lot more now that okay, these sculptures of these these rocks that in the jungle that had been carved out, and Easter Island and stuff. We know a whole lot more about that than we did back then, and we know that there were brilliant people, even though they were, we'd consider them primitive by our point of view, but they were amazing at what they could do when they would move these large rocks. They weren't, lazy, and they had a lot of ingenuity. Oh, did I say that? I'm sorry. I meant to say it was, of course, Atlanta. It was Atlantis and Atlanteans that did it.
It's interesting you say that though, because on an episode of Futurama, he's he's in the ocean. He meets an actual mermaid, and you're thinking, well, that's not real. But in this case, what happened was Atlanta itself had been submerged, and they had become,
Ocean people.
Ocean people.
Yeah, I think I remember that now that you mention it. That's funny.
Yeah, because it was like he's like Atlanta, and you think it's going to be more, and then they pull it, and instead of saying "is," it's and then she's like taking him a tour around everything.
Yeah, did she have a southern accent?
Yeah, and it's not just a what'd you say? Like she hurries them through it. It's not just a Delta portal or whatever.
Funny, yeah, I love that show.
Yeah.
So Atlantis, folks, if you weren't paying attention in basically fifth grade,
and you would have been not paying attention if you were listening to us droning on off topic. But
yes.
Here we are.
Yes, you've aged 10 years since this episode started. So Plato, he spoke, so it was, as they quote here, spoke of a great world power that sank into the sea. And that's pretty much it. And since then, pretty much anything that's been discovered and can't be explained yet anyway, is usually attributed to Atlantis until it's proven otherwise. For example, the I'm going to butcher these names. The Antikythera mechanism, which in fairness is like super cool. It's bronze gears that make up a machine used to calculate where astrological bodies will be in the future.
Oh, is that the one that's like a little wheel?
Yeah,
Like a wheel with I've seen that.
And they're able to go in at a molecular level and see how because it was at the bottom of the sea for thousands of years, and it was compressed, and so it was like just one big, and so they now have the ability to go and see the different layers, so they know how it worked, and it was super brilliant, and nothing else like it anywhere in the ancient world. It was a machine used to calculate the astrological bodies for the future, which is pretty incredible in itself.
Yeah.
But
done by humans.
Done by humans who were very smart.
They're more ingenuitive than we're going to give them credit for.
Definitely. I think the thing
way smarter back then than we are now.
Well, I think that what held them back was their ability to create smaller things like gears and stuff. So like a watch today, that's a regular watch. It's they weren't at a metalworking
level. They could understand things, but they couldn't create some of what they envisioned.
Right. Just like with the pyramids, it was not made by ancient aliens. It was made by hardworking people who were brilliant. And
now, if you believe aliens did that, we're not here to like tell you you're wrong, or we don't want to alienate you from our audience. But on the other hand, no, they didn't do that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Okay, they didn't do it.
You can
get better things to do if they can traverse galaxies, even one galaxy over.
Yes.
Even within our galaxy, if you can go from Alpha Centauri to here, you're at such a level of technology that you don't give a shit about some primitive savages, moving of rocks.
I mean, depending on how advanced they are, they may not even see us as intelligent beings.
Right. Like even at this point, they're probably looking at us like we look at like ants.
Yeah, I mean, if they're
Ants are highly advanced as far as their level of what they can do in a civilization
yes,
on their level.
yep,
They
and
actually domesticate other insects for milk.
it's all within their own DNA. They don't even know why they're doing it. It's just they just do it, and it's all instinct. And
So yeah, but getting to that, it's like so is it as advanced as we are now? Who's to say somebody else is not looking at us like we're still like so primitive? We're nothing to them.
yeah,
So why would they come here to do that? That's what my question has always been.
and like I was talking to my dad once about this, and I was like, yeah, I don't know if aliens have ever visited Earth. If they have, probably passed it by, and it takes a lot to get across space. Even if you create wormholes and stuff, you got to have an unbelievable amount of energy for it, and all these things are based off of our understanding of
But
physics.
once
So
again, any thing that they would do to like circumvent the amount of time it takes, even with warp drive engines, they are such an advanced state of understanding technology at
yeah,
the very least that how could we even possibly relate to them?
yes. I mean, just look at this. This is this mechanism which was done like thousands of years ago, and for the longest time we just looked at it as, oh, it's like a metal gear. When years later we find out it was like 20 gears, and this is what it did. It took us time to that was only a couple thousand years ago,
Yeah.
and we're that much more advanced technologically than they are.
Well, just once again, so many things were pigeonholed into being like we got help because somebody can't understand it, and so now there's a lot of archaeology that tries to recreate using the technology and the materials of that particular time to try to then say, how do you do this? Like the blue stones that were used in Stonehenge,
Yeah,
they pretty much figure that's probably they were floated upriver from Wales,
yeah, yeah,
because obviously the displacement in water will more than offset, and they can show like we can make something that can hold something of that weight.
right. And they may not have been at a point where they were like, give me a pen and a piece of paper and I'm going to write down how big the boat has to be to hold this. No, they just, you know, that one sunk. We need a bigger boat, that kind of thing. So
Right. Yeah. So you would
they were
just
smart.
but someone figured it out,
Look
someone
at,
did.
look at what people did since in only 2,000 years, the founding of Christianity. Look at these incredible marvels of these cathedrals and all this stuff that people built. And some of them took
Mhm.
40, 50, 60 years to make these things. Well, that's because people worship a god. Back then, the Pharaoh was the god. So they put just as much effort and thought into it
Right.
as we do. So you got to give these
And
people credit.
it's not just the surface of it. That alone is impressive, but the tunnels and chambers underneath these structures
Yeah. And one of the
is
main
highly
ones,
advanced.
the a very somewhat recent in the last like 10 years theory, is that the one that's like a long chamber and it has steps on it and stuff, and they're like, why did they make this? And a guy came up, a French dude came up with the theory that what this actually does is it's a pulley and weight system that help them to bring those large stones from the bottom where they had them up to the top where they
Mhm.
needed them, and then when they were done they just closed it in, because of course they're thinking nobody's ever going to get in this thing. So
Right.
that's kind of how it was. Atlanteans made it. If they don't know it, they
Yeah, that's exactly back in the day, and this predates even the '70s. But '70s was a big had a big resurgence in popularity.
yeah,
If we want
yeah,
to pull back just for a minute from the show, but the show is pretty much hitting on a lot of these bizarre concepts that were being reintroduced, maybe because of the counterculture,
yeah,
maybe because they were rediscovering some of the writings and some of the thinkers of the '20s.
right,
I'll even say even like Aleister Crowley, for instance. It was a
hmm,
resurgence in what he was doing, and I'm trying to think of a couple other examples, but for instance, H.P. Lovecraft in literature,
Right.
had a resurgence. And so with all of this cosmos and otherworldly ideas, well, that was, at a point where, like, or The Hobbit even, that was, everything had a resurgence in that period. And it kind of like, once you got out of the 60s into the 70s, and then it became probably the first time it became like corporate when you think about it.
Yeah. 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 I
You
think,
know,
yeah, more mainstream than just fringe. I mean, and
yes,
this,
exactly. It went from fringe to being mainstream.
yeah,
And the time that we are kids. So for us, it's like, oh yeah, we think a lot of this stuff was possible because it's what we're exposed to. And some of it, is hogwash, and some of it, you could say we still don't know.
right. And in this show, for example, in this case, in this show, they had enough knowledge and truth, but they also went, they kind of overlooked some things. So, for example, I'm glad you said that, set it up perfectly. The show, it showed a bunch of structures from all over the world that, align with the summer and winter solstice. And, we've known for a long time that that's what happens. They suggest that these cultures must have had communications with each other because, as the show puts, um, quote, it almost uses the same technology. Well, yeah, there's steps to technology, and they all kind of were doing it. The people who lived
They,
in
yeah, they
Central
all
America,
evolved to that time. Yeah.
they
So,
didn't. People in Central America that made these great statues, they didn't have anything to do with. They never saw, never met anything like that in Egyptian. It just makes sense that they made these pyramids because they were the best kind of shape to make. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to
right.
make a
Well,
cylinder,
also, what the thing that people, when they looked at just form, they're not looking at function.
right?
So let's say the Aztecs, the step pyramids, they're used ceremonially in a ceremonial fashion, whereas in Egypt they're tombs,
Right.
you know, but nothing of like their religious order dogma was celebrated there.
Yeah.
Once they're buried, it was just that's where they're buried. They're gangsters, they do everything big, it's like
In one part of this episode, they say that a structure in Egypt was called the quote high room of the sun, and then 8,000 miles away in the Andes Mountains, they had another structure, and inside that structure, it had something that was called quote the hitching post of the sun, and they're like. This is so much the same. And I'm thinking, no, one is high room of the sun, the other is hitching post of the sun. Both of these both of these cultures worshipped the sun, so one's a high road and one's a hitching post.
everybody thought at a certain level, everybody gave significance to the sun.
Yeah,
I guarantee you, like every religion, like the
they
sun
absolutely
matters,
did.
man, because that's life.
Yeah, that makes the plants grow, keeps us warm. Yeah. Well, they did say that, there was one of the things, one of the most startling things they said is that all of these cultures have in common is a shared belief in eternal life. And I was thinking, phew, thank God that people had Atlantis around to give us human spirituality, because otherwise we never would have had it. I mean,
I mean, yeah.
they're making some leaps that,
Well, yeah. Well, what I'm getting at though, because Atlantis was kind of intermingled in with that whole ancient aliens thing,
yeah,
in terms of aliens engineered some humans
yeah,
to be more advanced. Those more advanced ones turned out to be Atlanteans.
right,
They had this thriving civilization taking up a significant amount of the planet in some tens of thousands of years ago that was all lost. All of it. Not one arc. You can't find it, man. You'll never find any of it,
right,
after the cataclysm. It's just gone.
yeah,
What that cataclysm is that geologists surely could see and recorded, stratus. What am I trying to say?
yeah,
The stratospheres.
yeah,
They would clearly be able to find that. And and physicists would clearly, find some radiation, like a half-life of something, some cosmic radiation that would correspond to that time period.
Everything you just said, archaeologists and the like have discovered multiple of these things. They know when these things happened, where they happened. It's not like, oh, this is just some big mystery that happened and no one can find any proof. They found proof for all kinds of things, and none of it leads to Atlantis. So,
and there's nothing that can show of any ancient civilization that far back, even if you say, well, preservation bias and
right.
You'd get something. There's no way the whole thing could be going down. I mean, I guess if the whole planet was like molten on the surface, maybe. I don't know.
If it were
we
millions,
know that too,
of
because
years
we'd
ago.
find that. Even that,
Right.
we would know that there was a period where everything burned up. We would know it because of, like, here's this point that is traditionally associated with the existence of Atlantis.
Yes, I think that if Atlantis ever did exist, and wasn't just made up by Plato, then it was probably more like Baghdad, was thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. So like the first.
Well, I'm just thinking of, like, I was going further back, like the Assyrians or something along that line,
Right. Well, what is commonly thought of as the first, actual civilization was right where Baghdad is, and the Babylonians and that kind of thing. That's where all that was. So that was, even that we have lots of information on. As a matter of fact, the city's still there. So I don't know. It just seems like
we found nothing of a level that would correspond to being tens of thousands of years ago. We found nothing.
We have satellite imagery of every square inch of this planet, and we haven't, they have found an area, like I think I mentioned earlier, where it sort of resembles, there was like something that's underwater now that sort of resembles the concentric circles that Plato mentions and stuff. But that there's no evidence that there was even anything on that other than just, so, basically the episode signs off with Leonard Nimoy saying, of one thing we can be certain: the kingdom of Atlantis is no myth, it's history. And I have to say, you're full of shit, dude.
he knew that too. He would agree with you.
Yeah.
But
he was rolling his eyes as
Leonard Nimoy, and I have a habit, an expensive habit.
Yes, I'm Leonard Nimoy, and as far as Atlantis goes, I think it's totally real, man.
Oh, yes.
That's some good stuff. So but
so anyway, particularly Chevy Chase for Modern Problems.
Oh yeah,
you got to watch that. Dabney Coleman and his Dabney Coleman-iest.
Yes.
What are you looking at?
Movie.
He's a freak.
He was into.
I'm a goddamn good-looking man.
I forget who he was in love with. It was the black maid, and I can't remember her name.
Oh, she was what, Nell on
Nell? Yeah.
Yes, everyone of our journey knows Nell. Everyone would be like, fuck yeah, Nell.
Yeah, I loved that lady. Yeah. She was cool. Yeah. But so anyway, on to your your subject matter. What was it? What did you choose?
Well, I went with probably one of the most popular of that decade, for damn sure, and we're only halfway through it when this is released. Bigfoot, aka Sasquatch.
Wow.
So I'm covering all the bases.
I loved Bigfoot. He was big back in the day, man.
Oh yeah. So I'm just gonna also say I had this written down in my notes as the Bigfoot episode, or because you have to always, if you're going to be really artsy, you have to have a or subtitle,
right?
Or what the hell am I looking at in the beginning of this? You can't see any goddamn thing in the 70s movies.
Yes.
And so this is what I thought of. We've all seen the Patterson-Gilman footage 1,254 times just in the past week.
At least.
So it's difficult to think that this has not existed since the beginning of time. But that's when you realize it was fairly recent footage at the time we were watching this episode of In Search Of.
I didn't even think of it that way, but yeah, you're right.
I mean, I got right here. Here, for instance, 1967, the Patterson Gilman footage released into the wild. Like Bigfoot? Oh,
Wow.
never mind. Anyway, and just on an aside, I did not know it was known as the Patterson Gilman footage. Have I been Berenstain Bears? Because I've always heard it referred to as the Patterson footage.
I always thought it was the Patterson footage too.
So the Gilman family state like sued the shit out of everyone, so they have to refer to it as Patterson Gilman. Because when I looked it up on Wikipedia, it was all just referred to as that.
I don't know, but I mean, so three people were involved with that, right? So you had the Gilman and Patterson or whatever the other
And the,
guy's
and the
name
guy
was,
in the suits.
and the guy in the suit. Yeah.
Yes. And the
And
guy in
they,
the suit, because we all know, because it's after 50 years, it was released. It was fake. But we're getting ahead of my notes here.
oh yeah. Sorry,
All
go
right. So
ahead.
here's the timeline. The Patterson Gilman footage, or as we know, the Patterson footage was released into the wild. Like Bigfoot? And then I have question marks. And then I got Jennifer, what's her name from American Pie?
I don't know.
Jennifer
Yeah.
Coolidge.
Yeah,
And
Jennifer
so
Coolidge. Yeah.
it's got that confused look like in some of the commercials. Like Bigfoot? Huh?
Yeah.
So that's what I put on my notes. And then I had 1973. Matt eats nothing but SpaghettiOs for a year. Then I have 1974. Matt does a number 2. And then in 1977, In Search of Bigfoot airs.
And then you really shit your pants.
Yeah. This area was rife with Bigfoot adaptations. I'm reading verbatim from my notes. The $6 Million Man had 2 series arcs featuring the big guy.
Yep.
And so many TV movies regarding Sask. Case in point, can we call him that? Sask?
Sure. I mean, you're close enough to him, I think. Yeah.
Sask.
I mean, what's he going to do
Case in
about
point, I started streaming The Wrong In Search of Bigfoot. I should have known.
The wrong one.
I should have known that I was watching the wrong one when I noticed the In Search of title was missing the ellipses.
Wow.
And Leonard Nimoy. So,
no Leonard Nimoy and no ellipses. And how long did you watch this?
I think once I realized I'm not hearing Leonard Nimoy. So fortunately, thank God they had a narrator start up, before they start doing the music and the credits.
Wow.
But so I'm like, how the hell does that happen? So then I realized, oh man, there are a lot of TV and movie adaptations before this was even out in 1976. And I did some crunching of the data.
All right. Hit me.
So IMDb, 4
Step
films.
on me.
Yes. All right. You're Stretch Armstrong. You're oozing out under my toes.
Yes.
4 films, 4 documentaries, 2 TV movies between the years of 1970 and 76.
Wow.
All right. Films. You got Bigfoot, 1970. The Legend of Boggy Creek, 1972. Okay. It doesn't say Bigfoot, but it's pretty much Bigfoot adjacent.
Yes, it's MST3K. I learned on that watching that show. That I've seen that, and it was in Arkansas, created by a guy that was worked at the University of Arkansas, and I think that he wanted to make a movie. I don't think he believed in Bigfoot, but there was Bigfoot in that area.
He's sort of he's like the George Romero of Bigfoot, of Arkansas Bigfoot movies.
Wow.
I'm telling
Good for
you.
him.
Yes. I hope they met. Anyway, so then you had documentaries. Oh, I'm sorry. I hadn't even finished all the films. So yeah, Bigfoot, Legend of Boggy Creek, 1975 had Sasquatch. Never heard of it, but
Nice.
IMDb says it was a film. and then there was Sasquatch, The Legend of Bigfoot. How on the nose can you get there from 1976, a year before? Documentaries had Bigfoot, Man or Beast, 1972. The Mysterious Monsters, 1975. I think it was just a portion of The Mysterious Monsters. The Legend of Bigfoot, 1975. And once again, another really obvious one, In Search of Bigfoot, 1976.
Wow.
Now TV movies, Curse of Bigfoot, 1975. And then there was Blood Beast of Monster Mountain, 1975. Same year as the Curse of Bigfoot, but how many kids would have just been like, I mean, look at this, but now they've already seen there's a Bigfoot. So they're already thinking there's some monster out there.
Everybody's jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah, everyone's doing it, man. So So, you're thinking, oh, well, that's what they're doing in search of. It's just a big old Bigfoot trend. Look at all this that just happened.
It was, if you weren't alive then, I mean, Maddie's, laying out all these things that they made and stuff back then. That you couldn't just grab your camcorder or your phone and go make a little stupid movie. That just took money and time and effort. And, people were really into Bigfoot. He just suddenly, appeared everywhere. And I have no idea why.
Indeed. And so for that to be so popular in the early to mid 70s, what brought it into the forefront? Well, I don't have the answer here, but
marijuana.
But I will say, if you're concerned about them riding trends, well, you just gotta just relax. It's just a show because they rode every trend, man, all of them.
Yes, all of them.
And just think, our fragile, receptive Gen X brains were inundated with paranormal, pseudoscientific poppycock.
Yes, poppycock is a good way to put it.
My good man.
Oh, shenanigans, fisticuffs. Yes.
Then again, dear reader, please allow me, what little dignity I have in my possession, to gracefully portray to you the delicate nature of our besmirched cohorts. That is all to say, it isn't easy being a kid in the 70s.
Nope.
Not when your dreams are a marshmallow salad of Sid and Marty Krofft, Bigfoot, Bermuda Triangle, UFOs, and sprinkled in liberally with the fruit, Saturday morning cartoons.
Yes.
And then there's the controversy in the episode itself. No one, this show, someone will need to kill a Bigfoot to prove it exists. And that after all these years of watching things about Bigfoot, I never remembered that one. I immediately was like, what the fuck? Wouldn't the first thought be to just trank one? I mean, wouldn't it be a big thing? Like, we're going to be out there and they're trained just like with bears or whatever else. We're going to be especially on the lookout for a Bigfoot. But I guess their idea was a hunter will encounter one and kill it in self-defense.
Yeah. As it runs away.
Exactly. But it doesn't make sense. I mean, they just went so in on that. They come back and forth between this, small time, county mayor or something talking about how we don't want to do that to this other guy who's supposed to be your scientist guy.
Right.
And the mayor is the one who's like, let's be okay with the Bigfoot. And the other guy's like, no, we're going to have to kill one to be able to study it. I was just like, I don't know if I like this.
Excuse
me. I don't know
me.
if I like this at all. I didn't sign up for this because none of the other ones have I ever heard about this. I think they made it up for the show.
Sir, could we capture it and maybe learn a lot more from watching it and observing it? It's crazy. The first thought they have is they kill it so they can prove that it exists.
Because to finish my notes here, I said, but I guess the idea is a hunter will encounter one and kill it in self-defense.
Right.
But if you could get one alive temporarily in captivity, once again, in my quotes, my air quotes,
right,
you'd have the advantage of studying both its biology and behavior.
Right.
This is never brought up in the show. And the sciencey guy is so cocky after a while. I want to just tell him to shut up and sit the heck down. I do. He is so sure the footprint indicates the ball of the foot placed to better distribute large weight, and that the size of that Patterson footage body is too big to be a man in a suit. And yet years later, that was all debunked. So where are you now, Mr. Scientist?
Yeah.
He probably was just a guy who said he was a biologist and no one checked his credentials.
Right. Yeah. This is in search of, So.
Yeah. What if he was just the cousin of the producer pretending to be Mr. Know-It-All? But I digress.
Actually, you probably could look on IMDb and find that out.
Yes.
Yeah.
But then my last observation before I lose it is Leonard Nimoy looked like he'd aged 20 years since Star Trek.
It's the hair.
I mean, just everything. He just looked, certainly with the, the more raggedy hairstyle. Sure.
Yeah. The hair, the clothes.
Yeah. But, his voice, of course, that's
3
the guy.
packs a day.
But that's all I have for that.
So that was the big, a big thing back in the 70s was Bigfoot. Like MADMAN said, it was a $6 million man played by Andre the Giant. And it was just it was kind of part of the
Yes, I
zeitgeist
know.
of America.
So by the time we got to this, like we definitely knew what this whole Bigfoot character was.
Right. I remember watching this episode as a kid. I really do. And I was thinking at the time, I don't remember any confusion. What's Bigfoot? It was like, oh, I get to see a thing on Bigfoot.
Hey, did you have the Sasquatch from $6 Million Man?
I did not have it. No.
Nobody has it.
I know.
Somebody bought it.
It's super rare. I mean,
God, yeah. Like everybody who's like was so lucky to have gotten this Steve Austin.
Yeah.
Yeah, you ask him, did you get Sasquatch? No, none of us
had Steve Austin, but I didn't have Sasquatch.
God, man. And then you remember little details like, oh yeah, the capsule opened up to look like this little operating table.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah, it was so cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. So for me, that's all right. So for me, unless you have any final notes on Bigfoot,
I'm good. We'll forever discuss Bigfoot. I mean, not us per se, but humanity.
Humanity, yeah. I mean, in 200 years, when everything on Earth is being scanned at the same time, and they know where everything and everyone is at any time, they will still be like, well, maybe Bigfoot has a power where he can't be seen by technology, whatever.
Yeah.
Who knows?
It's garbage. He does not exist.
Speaking of disappointing garbage, the next one that
garbage is a funny word, but go ahead.
Garbage is, yeah. The next one I saw was episode 16, came out June 8th, 1977, and it was on Dracula. Now, I'm sure I'll have to put this in perspective for younger audiences. They didn't have 200 vampire movies all the time. If you ever saw a vampire movie, it was most likely Dracula. And
you either saw the original like 1931, or you may have seen one of the color ones in the 60s from Hammer,
Christopher Lee,
and those had shown a lot. Yeah, Christopher Lee, yes,
yeah. Those were like Saturday afternoon kind of things. If you didn't see them in the theater,
but that was pretty much it, because there was not really not a lot of great like post 1969.
And I in watching this, I've realized something. So, seeing this episode as a kid, again, you've got the creepy music, you've got Leonard Nimoy's creepy, and it starts out with, the episode opens with, in Innsbruck in Germany stands a monument to perversity. That's literally the opening line of it. And it shows pictures from this, paintings in this one museum that are of, the people who have that werewolfism or whatever. Their bodies are covered with this long hair. So they, would show all these different paintings that were, they had the people with the hair all over them. They had people who were, born without arms and legs and all this kind of stuff. And, basically what they called freaks at the time, we would call unfortunate, deformed people now with a little more, sensitivity. But they also had a picture of, and you've seen this picture 1,000 times. It's of Vlad the Impaler.
Yes.
And
that's been used ad nauseum.
Yeah. As far as I know, it's the only picture, the only painting of Vlad I've ever seen. So,
yes.
But, and
his eyes are too close together. Oh wait, that's just a style of art.
Probably. Yeah. And, Nimoy says, his real name, Vlad Dracula. And I thought to myself, I don't know if I thought Dracula was ever based off a real person before this. This is probably the first time so it probably did inform me. I was probably like, huh, really? I didn't know that the book Dracula by Bram Stoker was somewhat sort of based off of Vlad the Impaler.
He makes a passing reference, like maybe one reference at all.
It's like around the same area is where Dracula happens as Vlad.
He mentions of his blood, of his heritage, his bloodline.
Yes, his bloodline.
and that's it mentions of what his bloodline has done, and that's the only way you would glean that he's descended or literally of. So yeah, I'll have to look it up. But
if you haven't read the actual Bram Stoker's Dracula, people, you really should. It's fascinating. It's a great
I have.
story.
You know what? I've not read that since the '90s. I need to pick that up again.
I think it's called epistolary is how it's written. So it's just basically
epistolary. Yeah.
Epistolary. Okay. So basically that book is written like notes back and forth from people.
Yeah. They're between journal entries and letters. Yes. All of that.
Very cool. Very, very cool.
There is no prose per se.
No, it was very inventive. It's super cool. And
thank God he did that. And thank God he didn't like hang everything on Lair of the White Worm, but I digress.
Yeah, no kidding. So they had within this episode, of course, they go from his name is Vlad Dracula, and then you see, Nosferatu, the original one, and Christopher Lee as Dracula, and some, added with some really, really creepy music and black and white pictures of people being tortured and stuff. And I was just thinking, damn, this would be scary, when you're like 6 years old. But in the episode, so that's the setup for it, right? You're like, oh, this is going to be about Dracula. Not really, not particularly like it would be about Bigfoot. You see two men riding through flowers on horseback. That's the next thing. It's this doctor who mountain climbs for pleasure, and he hires a farmer. And this is in, right around where Vlad was from.
Boring. Get to Dracula.
No, right. Just kidding. And they're both.
Just do what you do, man. Just do it.
Yeah. They're all just sitting around talking in a foreign language about Dracula while Leonard Nimoy tells us what they're actually talking about. And, he does mention, some of the things like Voodoo, who was in love with the king's daughter, Anna, and some of this other mythology besides Vlad Dracula, that he kind of mixed in with the background of Dracula himself. But in Bram Stoker's Dracula, he's just really a human looking monster. He's not, oh, my broken heart with love. No, he's a monster. Mm-hmm. And, at this time, basically he mentions multiple times throughout this whole episode, says few people know that Dracula was based partially on a real prince of darkness whose deeds are perhaps more shocking and more terrifying than those of the fictional vampires. Yeah, actually, if you read about what Vlad the Impaler did, he makes Dracula look like a freaking nothing.
Yeah, that he liked that impaling. He was named. It was an apt name.
He was named thusly. That's right. He earned that name.
What was the legend was? And I've got no source whatsoever because it was probably just a thing that supposedly people said then. But supposedly, you could have a sack of gold lying in the middle of any street, and you would not have to worry about anyone taking it.
Right.
Like if you'd left it. Yeah. Because that's how afraid everyone was of him.
Yeah. Only the Ottoman Empire had the balls to even try to mess with this guy, even after they had, he had like strung up thousands of their soldiers, with a gigantic impaling spike through their anus out of their mouth. So the guy look it up, folks. The guy was a lunatic, but the end. So it sheds light.
So then when you see a guy that's like just going around and like biting women, mostly women in the neck and sucking blood, you're like, oh, how cute.
Yeah, right. It's like
you're adorable.
Yeah, by comparison,
can I take you home and I'll put you with the cats? You're so cute.
He's such a good vampire.
Exactly. But you don't have rabies, right? When you go back to being a bat, I got to put you in this box, and I don't want to have one of those undetectable bites that I don't know about, and then 2 weeks later I got rabies.
You've got to be like Ozzy Osbourne, bite his head off.
Yeah, so exactly.
So anyway, the episode goes like that. Just briefly touches on what Dracula is, but more about Vlad in that area. But they do only have 30 minutes, so it's not like it's a deep dive. But at the end of the episode, Nimoy says, if some light has been shed on the truth, in this search for Dracula, it doesn't mean that belief in vampires will be dispelled. And I was thinking, actually, yeah, yeah, it really does. You
But he
literally
can't say that it will, that it actually did even then. It's just, it's like, that's not good copy.
maybe he just maybe he used the sentence, it doesn't mean that belief in vampires will be dispelled, and then in a very, very low, volume, he says, just kidding, so all right, so that was it for Dracula, which was a
Wow.
very big letdown. I thought it would be
Well, as much
a lot
stuff as
cooler.
we've seen about Dracula
Right.
since then, I mean, that's probably, we've gotten way more documentaries and various, like adaptations
Yeah,
from like the 80s on.
but I mean, look at what, when you thought of a vampire back then, you thought of Count Dracula, but now, maybe Count Chocula, but it's basically the
Yeah.
same guy. But now we have,
One
we
has
have,
got chocolatey marshmallows and the other doesn't.
yeah, one murders people and the other just gives you a happy breakfast that makes you have to poop. So,
And also, he's killing you slowly with diabetes.
diabetes. But now, of course, we have, there's very few movies made about Dracula. They make up their own vampires now. So we've seen a lot of cool vampires, whether it's daywalkers like Blade or
What was it, Morbius?
oh god,
That's such a one-off type of being a vampire.
yeah, that was terrible. And
I liked him back when I was a kid, though. I did like the character, but I don't know.
like Underworld, and you've got she's like the hottest vampire they've ever had. But they, that was cool. Fights between vampires and lichens. Underworld was what it was called, and all that kind of stuff. So we've had some. There's Dracula 2000. Have you ever seen that?
Dracula 2000. That was a while back.
Yes, probably around the year 2000. I would assume,
pretty sure,
or a little before.
I didn't see it. No, I didn't, because by then I was just like not into it because they're just doing some other type of vampire, and I was more traditionalist in that I wanted it to be
right,
just like more Count Dracula adaptation.
Right. Well, folks, if you don't want that movie spoiled, it's very cool. If you don't want it spoiled, kick it through a couple minutes. I'll just tell Maddie real quick why this is so cool, why this movie was so cool.
Yes. Why?
So, why? Well, basically,
why?
You find out that Dracula is what he is because he's actually Judas Iscariot, and he was cursed for turning on Jesus to walk the world and be hated and have to live, never be able to see another sunrise. And that explains like why he has he's adverse to silver, because of course Judas had 30 pieces of silver that he got in return. It was cool. It has some cool things about it for sure. I mean, it's very, very late 90s and how it looks and how it's presented and all that kind of stuff. But
which one was this?
Dracula 2000.
Okay. I think that's been carried over from another adaptation. Something to do with Judas.
That was the first. It would make sense. It's pretty funny. But
yeah.
So anyway, what was your next one?
Well, I was going to mention the Easter Island.
Cool.
But to me, well, one, I forgot to take notes. But essentially what it comes down to is they were going on a at this point, mostly semi-debunked theory of cannibalism. And there was a great war on the island.
And that's why there's nobody there.
And that's why it was like the way it was. Mm-hmm. But now, more likely, it was due to after contact. Just the way the evidence is mounted. But in this, it's talking about there was some big conflict between, I guess, maybe like a civil war. And it was just like, okay, that's just more sciencey. It didn't go into anything really about the
heads.
The heads, yes.
The cool part.
Yeah, the part you really want to know about. Like, it mentions them, but it just talks so much about this theory.
So what I've heard, what I've seen, I should say, because I've looked up stuff on it, and is basically that, one of the things that they thought was, where did these heads come from? Nobody knows. Why were, it was a long time before they realized that actually the rest of the body, they're not just heads, there's a body. And
Right.
that's buried
Mm-hmm.
under, like, why did they bury that and just leave the heads? Were they headhunters and it was a warning and there's no trees? How did they get it there? Well, what really happened was, and they're sure about this because there are people that live on the island and they're the
Yeah.
ancestors of the people who made these.
Yeah.
And basically, there were forests, and they used a lot of that wood to take these rocks these stones that they'd carved into, their kings and whatever, and would move them to where they are and lift them up. And then they needed more room for farmland, so they would cut down the trees. So they had very few trees. And since tree roots keep erosion from happening at a certain pace, it eroded a lot faster, and they couldn't keep crops there. And all that soil from the top eroded down and fully covered the up to the neck, basically, of these things.
Yeah.
So it's not some big conspiracy. They know what they know everything about it. So, but back then, I'm not sure if they did, but I can't imagine they didn't because the people live there.
Yeah, I think some of it was we just didn't have the kind of widespread coverage we have of that, back then. So maybe people would have been more told, more accepting of the idea that, oh, we're only now just hearing of this.
Yeah, I thought it was probably because of Atlantis myself, but
maybe.
Yeah.
So I didn't have a lot else to throw on that one.
So basically, you didn't learn anything about it because they really didn't. They didn't have anything to cover other than, ooh, this is mysterious and lots of creepy noise.
No, it was mostly just about the supposed massacre.
Right.
The people, whether it was a Civil War thing or if it was like in some kind of conflict with European contacts. That's what it was really mostly about. It wasn't not much at all about how did these strange stone heads appear, as much as I wanted it to be. I mean, they mentioned this strange, mysterious, whatever they are called, but it was mostly about this whole thing about why these people were all wiped out.
Come on, In Search Of. Stay in your lane. You know what the people want.
Yeah, exactly. So that was kind of, I hope it doesn't mess up your skit that much. But anyway.
No, that's okay.
Oh, wait.
I
didn't say that.
About?
What? Skit?
I don't know what you're talking about.
So I want, go back to yours and then I'll have notes for one more.
Yeah, and I'll have this one and then one more. Yeah. So the next one that I had was episode 41, and that came out in March 9th of 1978, and it was on hypnosis. And this was also kind of a thing that they did, besides the things that are kind of like silly almost, if you could look at it that way. Hold on a second. Ozzy. No. I don't know whatever Ozzy's doing, but I don't trust him. He's sneaking around.
That's what Sharon says.
Yeah. But
it's not even funny anymore. Oh my God.
I know.
Sorry.
That's right. So hypnosis, this episode starts out with the woman being operated on. That she's allergic to anesthesia, and so they knocked her out with hypnosis. But to be honest, I'd prefer tequila or something that's going to totally knock me out. I wouldn't trust that. They have another, so that's a little skit that they do. Not skit, it's a little thing they show. And then the next one is followed up by a memory a man is guided through using hypnosis, where he's a cop and he sees this one robber who escaped him, and they use hypnosis to let him see what this guy looked like to better profile him, I guess. And maybe
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah, maybe that works, but I wouldn't want to put someone in the chair because somebody had hypnosis. They showed
you mean a parlor trick,
right?
And somebody could go to its chair.
Yeah, and they had the parlor tricks in this too.
But it's be like, but Your Honor. He did this thing that's questionable at best.
There was a clock that went right in front of me, and he talked to me all slow. Next thing I know, I wake up and my pants are unbuttoned. I got a red shanker, but I did tell him all about this killer.
And, you know, I mean, what do you think? We're going to be as reliable as a lie detector test?
Video footage? No, I don't think so. They did show the parlor trick stuff you had, which is of course where they get a bunch of people up there on the stage or stage or in the room, whatever, and they you now believe you're a chicken, and they all cluck. They're all rubes, they're in on it, right? Or they just do it for fun.
Mm-hmm.
None of these that kind of stuff doesn't actually work. Now, I talked to one of my best friends, Bill, who's a neurologist, and I asked him, I was like, so how much bullshit is this stuff, right? Because like you said, we usually think about the parlor tricks, but he said, well, when you're, because my buddy's a neurologist, so he would know about this kind of thing, and he's like,
Bill
Bill Man, that's right.
Yeah.
And he said that, well, the real version of hypnosis is things like heavy concentration on something. So for like when a woman's given birth and she's doing her breathing exercises, that is to basically convince her and lock her in on this thing she's doing, that breathing, focus on the breathing as opposed to painful childbirth, right? And, it only works to a certain degree. But the stuff where they're like, watch the clock, or I remember when we were at VCU, this guy Clinton, he was studying to be a clown and doing all this kind of stuff, and he had
hold on. At VCU, he was studying to be a clown. I mean, I'm not disparaging the profession. I just didn't know there was a way you could get certified in being a clown.
Well, he didn't at VCU.
Commonwealth. Okay.
No, right. At VCU, he was taking like
Florida State Flying Circus.
At VCU, he was studying business or something, but he really wanted to go to a place down in Florida that teaches you to be a clown, juggling and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And they had hypnosis, and he was trying to do it. And he had me and another.
Wait. He went down the floor. He had to have gone to Florida State then. Had to have done it.
Probably. I can't remember. It's been a while, but it was something like that. And he was, he was really into it. And he was like, yeah, let me hypnotize you guys. It was me and another guy. And I'm just, the whole time he's doing it and my eyes are closed, and I'm thinking, okay, do I go along with this because I didn't want to hurt his feelings and let him know this is total bullshit? Or do I just say, nah, it ain't working, bro? And of course I went with it. No, it ain't working, bro. Because it ain't working, bro. It's stupid. And I don't know. The other guy was like, yeah, I kind of felt like something was happening. And I'm thinking, either you're the weakest willed dude I've ever met, or you're just full of shit. So you don't want to hurt his feelings. I get it, but it's a bunch of crap. Now in this case,
but getting back to In Search Of,
yes, in this case, and In Search Of, back to In Search Of,
I'm Leonard Nimoy.
They were using the memory. They were trying to find the memory of this guy who was a police officer whose partner had been killed, and he had been somehow hurt or something. But they wanted to kind of go back in his mind and have him. He said that the cop tells the story about being shot by, quote, a male Negro. And and I'm like, and my first thought was, I'm sorry, officer, but I'm going to need a little bit more than your hypnosis story before I put this man in the chair for killing your. I mean, he was a black guy. Oh, well, that's that nails it down. I mean, it was just stupid.
Died horrible.
It was horrible and stupid, and
you need say no more, sir.
Yeah, it's under no circumstances is that ever going to hold up in court. And why would he need hypnosis to even? I mean, the guy shot him. I could understand if he lost.
So wait a minute. Let me back up.
Yeah,
this is an In Search Of hypnosis.
Yes,
that's what we're talking about. Okay.
Yes. Yeah. So the cop, his partner had been shot and killed, and he had been shot and didn't die, and he couldn't remember what had happened. he couldn't remember details. So they put him under hypnosis and have him describe what happened. And, I mean, okay, black guy shot him. Got it. I'm sure it was true. There's probably other people that saw it. But, if you're trying to pull out details of, he had shorter hair. He, his ears were kind of big for, if you're a kind of average guy. He was 6 foot, anywhere between 5'8" and 6'7".
Some distinguishing feature, like, he had like really long legs from the knee down or something.
Yeah, he had a scar from, across his face, a real evil scar. I mean, it's just nobody is going to go for this. My grandfather wouldn't have bought it, right? So, absolutely terrible. And all I learned from watching this is that I would not trust hypnosis. It doesn't work, and I certainly wouldn't put anybody away for it.
But it was a very popular subject. I think, once again, I think in the 60s, it started to have like a rebirth.
Yeah. Yeah, people were tripping and shit. So it was.
Yeah, so you could kind of lump it under that, reaching another state of consciousness.
Right. Now, the last part Nimoy mentions, he's sitting in a room with someone who's being hypnotized, and he says, people who are using hypnosis to increase their learning speed, it allows people to see things like movies in their minds, and that if the mind is indeed a gateway to heaven, perhaps hypnosis is the key. And I thought, I'm going to go with Jesus on this one, and you can keep your hypnosis, because I'm not just skeptical. I'm confident you're full of shit. So. But they sold it like it was a real, like it was like totally.
Well, I mean, most of these episodes are pseudoscience. They're not real science.
Yeah, this was more pseudo than science. So
yeah.
So what was your next one?
The last one for me, D.B. Cooper.
Ooh, a good one.
Well, people don't know what the hell that is. Well, D.B. Cooper was not a late 70s, TV, whatever, trucker who was like avoiding the cops, the Mounties.
With his monkey.
Right.
That was BJ.
No. D.B. Cooper was a guy who hijacked a plane in the early 70s.
Yep.
And you would think, well, that's a real one-off, until you realize, there had been others in recent years and several after him, until they finally started putting metal detectors in airports.
Oh, so that's why.
But anyway, so I have my notes. D.B. Cooper, or how is this still unsolved? So I'm watching along with this, and an interesting thing stuck out. And that is this: D.B. Cooper was inaccurately reported. He's Dan Cooper. So then I thought, then why you just keep referring to him as D.B. Cooper after you pointed that out?
Yeah, and 50 years still to this day.
But in the episode itself, even then they're like, well, it turns out the tag and everything and whatever the name was used was Dan Cooper, not D.B. Cooper. That was just inaccurately reported. And it just took off from there.
Wow.
So, but even with the episode, after they've said it was wrong, they still then just keep calling him D.B. Cooper.
That's crazy.
We have to now, because that's why you know him as.
Yeah. I never thought of it before, but everything I've ever seen about D.B. Cooper, they mentioned that, he was actually called Dan Cooper, but it was misreported. And so he was D.B. Cooper. And so we just all call him D.B. Cooper now. And I'm thinking, well, no wonder you haven't figured it out.
Yeah, you can't.
Everyone's looking for D.B. Cooper.
Yeah, right. So then they mentioned air extortion. And this was pretty much the first of its kind. And then, yes, in my notes, I had several after him until they installed the metal detectors in 1973. And then at some point, what am I doing? I'm looking at my notes.
While you do that, can I tell the people what D.B. Cooper was famous for?
Oh, yeah. Why don't you give them some background?
All right. So basically in 72, is that what you said?
Yes, 72. He hijacked a plane. If you'd
He
like to go
hijacks
into
a
the
plane.
particulars,
That's
go
right.
for it.
Hijacks a plane, and in it, he hands the lady a note, says, "I have a bomb, and I want whatever $200,000, whatever it was." And they landed. They got everybody off the plane except for the pilot, of course, and or maybe the two pilots, whatever it was, and the woman stewardess, and they took off again. They gave him the money. They were being followed by actual fighter jets, and he had asked for parachutes, and then when he
Yes,
told the woman to
4.
go up front, when she goes up front, they realized that one of the chutes at the back, I guess, where you would take the luggage out and stuff, was open. They could tell because it was drags, and then he jumped out, and they never found him. So that's the crux of it. So go for it, Maddie.
Yes. Well, at some point I made a note that, as I guess he was, it was one person actually interviewed. It was a couple. The guy had gotten up to go to the bathroom and looks over and sees the stewardess with she's got a weird look on her face. And then he glances over at Dan Cooper. Notice he looks kind of weird. And then he goes to the bathroom. But it's almost like it was added in like, oh, it was unfortunate he had to walk by then. And I'm like, he had to pee. This dude's got to pee.
Right. He don't know what's going on.
He doesn't know what's going on. He doesn't know if he's going to mess up anything. Oh, well. And then I was like, he mentions he got a really good look at him. God, could you imagine if that had been the era of the iPhone?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, my God. It would have been like pictures of everybody. Like this, none of this.
Well,
Because he would have already been like, that was weird. And he probably would have, as he's going back over his shoulder, then quickly grab a shot of them or something,
well, not only that, but after September 11th, if anybody tried that on an American airline, they would be brutally beaten to death, probably, because you would just assume we're all going to die.
Right, yeah, right.
But so let's take this guy down. Unlike then, when most hijackings happened, they would basically just take me to Cuba or whatever and drop me off, and they would let people go. There really wasn't anything, obviously, like September 11th, where they were plunging into buildings and killing, thousands and thousands of people. So people would be like, "Oh, we'll just sit back and let this happen, and then when it's over, we'll catch them." But nowadays, you'd be like, "Oh, that guy's got a bomb. Well, fuck it, I'm gonna die anyway, so I might as well try to stop him."
Yeah, yeah. It would definitely not be just as quiet as it was. In this particular scenario.
But then he got away with the money,
basically, yes, he got away, and it almost sounds like, hey, he got away. Headed down south in this new running today, singing, go on, take the money and run. Anyway.
Oh yeah. So so basically they have found, since this episode ever came out, they have found, some of the money that they had that was like some kid was fishing with his dad or whatever, and he happened to come across a briefcase, one of the briefcases that had some of the money in it. It was exactly that money they had.
Mm-hmm.
They had
know because they could look at the serial numbers of what they found, and they would know it's from that time period.
Yeah, and so they didn't find any bones. They didn't find a body. They didn't find the
bones.
They didn't find the outfit or anything like that. So, either he died somewhere else, or he dropped some of it on his way down, and then he landed and then he escaped and no one ever found him.
And he lived the rest of his life and he got away with it.
Yep.
Less than $200,000.
Less than $200,000.
Which would have been the equivalent of like almost $1 million.
Yep. $1 million to live the rest of your life looking over your shoulder.
In early 70s money.
Doesn't really seem that good to me. But
yeah,
it was bold. I'll give him that.
Well, I did notice in here that when they were packing the chutes, they found out later that one chute was defective.
Ooh, wow.
So it's like, man. So I thought, when I saw that apart, like, all right, they said it's accidentally defective. That they would have actually really legitimately tested all those because they didn't know if he was going to take hostages.
Right.
So that's when, I realized, oh, he asked for shoots. They probably with the idea that he might take people, with him. So they don't want to give him bad shoots. But fortunately, that didn't happen because it turns out one of the shoots they had packed was wrong.
Jeez.
So that was like, oh my God. But
Yeah, if he had
fortunately,
taken somebody, that
yeah.
was just, jeez Louise.
And that's what was in this special. So if you were mentioning how this show could be creepy or spooky in some way, that kind of
Yeah.
hit me as an adult. Like that particular aspect, I just ran wild with it.
Yeah, they dodged a bullet with that. I'm glad. It's crazy. But
But
none of
yes,
those people were hurt or killed.
fortunately for them, there was everything's good. And the
Yeah.
guy who went back there to take a leak, nothing bad happened to him.
Yeah. And Dan Cooper got away with it. Of course, it wasn't his real name. I'm sure they've
Dan
checked.
Cooper, was an alias, but the alias was not DB Cooper. God
Right. I
damn
know.
it. We still are people still. If you were to just put Dan Cooper in, you're not going to get shit. But if you put DB Cooper, you've already got that sketch artist picture in your head. That's
Right.
what's going to appear.
It's just I've always thought that was funny too. That that the name we know him as is a mistake they made. So
Right.
I mean, how is anybody going to
From
find him when you?
supposedly by like what one publication.
Yeah.
How could it have happened? It had to have been more than one screwed up. I'm convinced, right? It was an inside job, man.
Yeah, I wouldn't
He
doubt
paid
it.
the press to like throw everyone off from Dan.
Yeah,
They're all in on it. They were all in on the take.
because he was like, you know what, having the, my real name is Frank Conniff, and I actually will go by Dan Cooper, but I'm going to tell them to call me DB Cooper, so I have two layers of
Subterfuge.
yeah. You're never going to be able to find me now.
Oh no, it's over. I am the master, and you are still the apprentice.
Yes, Padawan. So any more on Dan DB Cooper?
No, that was it. I just little things that just stood out to me on that, rather than the particulars, because we all kind of know the deal.
Yeah, very cool. All right, so I'm going to dive into my final
Oh,
one.
wait! I do have one thing.
Yeah.
I knew it, and I didn't write it down. But when I was doing further research, the few things that they had in their possession from back in the day that you may have been able to use for DNA.
Mm-hmm. Oh, cigarettes. Yeah.
One were the cigarettes. The sample of cigarettes was lost, and the hair strand has been lost.
But see, why would that has to be incompetence and not an inside job, because why would you even do that in the first place?
Well, the thing is it's not like one federal agency, messed up both. Like the other one, the cigarette butts were in possession of like local authorities who disposed of them. So it's just like the amount of just people being so careless makes you think, hell, almost anyone could have gone to the chair back then.
I know. Yeah, hypnosis. DB Cooper. He was a male Negro. Actually, no, he was white. No, I had hypnosis. I totally changed everything about it. Trust me.
Yeah,
crazy,
it's just
crazy.
Everything. Yeah, it's just what a hoot. But yeah, so basically, it's still unsolved.
Yeah. Speaking of unsolved mysteries, my next
I'm Peter Graves.
yeah, he could be creepy too. My next one and last one.
No. Peter Graves did not do that one. That was Unsolved Mysteries was
Oh, that was Robert Stack.
Thank you, Robert Stack. Sorry.
Yeah. He could be creepy for sure.
Yeah.
In the fog with the dark, and he had the trench coat on. Yeah.
Yeah, and the way he was berating, his former in an airplane.
Oh yeah.
Yes, just very frightening.
Yeah, I loved it. Just watch Airplane, people. We don't have time to tell you.
Yeah.
All right. So my last one, if you're ready.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
The last one here was episode 54. I'm really surprised it took them to get 54 episodes to get to this. It was October 2nd, 1978, and the greatest unsolved mystery of all time, Jack the Ripper. Now, this one
Oh,
is when I was watching it and I was like, damn, we would have been like 8 years old, 9 at most. Let's see, October 2nd. So I would have been 9.
you're like, man, I didn't even know they had prosthetics for entrails back then that looked this realistic.
Dude, it was,
Oh my.
it would, I
No, I
wouldn't have,
don't know.
I would not have slept that night for sure. Maybe not that week.
You probably
was,
didn't sleep this time after watching it.
It was creepy. I'll have to admit it.
You were like all like had the blankets all around you, your fetal position with your thumb in your
light
mouth.
on. Yeah, it was like, had the dog sleeping with me
Yeah.
as if he would do any good. But so I guess Jack the Ripper. So I doubt that I have to explain who Jack the Ripper was, but just a real brief. In the late 1800s, or they had
1880 something.
Yes, 1880 something. There was a series of murders, 5 of them, I believe it was.
5 grisly murders.
Yes, in a place called Whitechapel in London, which was super poor. Like we're talking, hello, governor. If somebody gave you $1, you were like the richest person within 14 blocks. It was terrible. And these women were prostitutes basically, and they were brutally murdered, and then progressively brutally murdered, and then they call him Jack the Ripper because he wrote to the press.
He just ripped at him
and to the cops, and said, signed it Jack the Ripper, and people were on alert for that time period.
He actually was taunting the press.
Oh, you didn't know that?
No.
Oh,
I must have forgotten about a lot of this lore, but that's just amazing to hear. Like, it was like such a TV. I mean, I'm not a TV, a movie with the classic, like going after him, like Silence of the Lambs, or something like that,
and stuff that only the murderer would have known. Like one of the murders, the woman was missing like her kidneys, I think it was, her liver, maybe it was. And when he wrote to the police, he said that her liver was delicious, and maybe he was gonna, next time he kills, he was gonna get something different or whatever. It was only by him. He was the only one who knew that wasn't a cop on the spot. And it's
chilling indeed.
He was absolute monster. And nobody ever found him. Now we do.
There have been several theories who it may have been.
There's some strong theories. Okay, that some thought that he was a doctor, but then that's kind of like probably not, because of just the way that he cut. He knew anatomy, but he didn't.
He had no precision.
Yeah, he wasn't surgical about it. And all this. So there were a bunch of different people in this, and they still, there's not 100% certainty that any of these people were Jack the Ripper. What most likely it was is this Polish guy who was a butcher, and so he would know about anatomy, right? Working on pigs, very similar to a human body. He hated prostitutes. He was crazy and violent, and then he went into a mental institution, and like right around that time, no more people were killed. Later, they found the only physical evidence they have from any of the murder scenes was a scarf, and that scarf had the victim's blood and somebody else's blood. And no, it was just the victim's blood. But anyway, come to find out, somehow this guy's family down the line ended up with that, and he did it. His name was like Alan Kowalski or something like that. He did it. He's Jack the Ripper.
I've not heard that.
Yeah, and
you're certain one from this episode of In Search Of.
Yes. Oh, In Search Of had no idea. Of course, they didn't have the DNA and all.
Well, right, yeah.
And this one was really well done. They put a lot of, they had like other actors. They had actors and stuff that do little vignettes. So as you would expect at the beginning, There was lots of, very dark footage with, my lady, type of women screaming at a silhouette coming at them with a knife, super spooky. And they used the engravings that were actually used in the press at the time, which were, ugh. I mean,
Oh, wow.
Jack just ripped these women apart, especially as it went,
They actually would put that in the paper. That's the photo, artist rendition of a woman being disemboweled.
Yeah. So
And
they
wow.
obviously didn't go to
I mean,
they have the pictures. You can go see the pictures online.
no, I just feel like it's funny and not
Yeah.
funny. I mean, I am
know what you
laughing, but I mean, the point being that, the society in one way is supposed to be so prim and proper, but
Yeah.
you could just show that
Yes.
like
Yes.
nothing.
And I mean, the pictures themselves are just horrid. Okay, it's horrible. But I said woodcuts, but they're actually engravings, and I mean they're just done in a way since they're so black and white, and it's very creepy. And the press, of course, they're trying to sell papers for this, right? Saucy Jack hit again,
Yeah.
and it was just, I guess
You're a naughty one.
the only people who took pictures were the cops. And so everybody else, the press, they didn't have any pictures. They only had these, descriptions. It was just, which made it even that much more terrible.
Yeah. Shoddy as shoddy can be.
Right. And like I was saying, the family entertainment thing that they had going on, they had an interview with this London police officer who tells us, and this is, I'm watching this, 9 years old, tells us that upwards of 7,000 women in London at that time were selling themselves for gin, a bed, and what's called a doss house, which is just a house that rents out their rooms individually.
Mm-hmm.
He said,
Flop house, yeah.
Yeah. And Jack London came to London 30 years later, after the last grisly murder, and said that even at that point, you could go there and buy a woman for a loaf of stale bread. It's like, hey, did you hear that, Johnny? Turn it up. You might want to hear that. And
I mean, it was bleak.
Yeah, it's
so many women forced into prostitution.
She probably gurgled on her own blood. Hey, hand me another beer.
Here she is dying a second time of consumption.
It's like here's another quote comes up. It's like hey Mary, put your dolly down and come here for a second. Listen to this guy. You'll learn something. And the guy says, once the Ripper had gotten them to a quiet place, it would have been quite easy of a matter for him to strangle them very quickly into unconsciousness. Hey, Mary, stop playing with your weebles and turn up the TV for me, will you?
Get in here. You need to learn this.
The guy continues. Almost certainly he would not have used the knife straight away. Women died from the effects of a cut throat, but there was bruising and other marks to show that they were probably stunned into unconsciousness, strangled or partly strangled, and then, when they were lying on the ground, only then was the knife used. You got that, Mary? Did you get that?
This is very important. Pay attention. Important. There's a knife.
You want to talk about this in school tomorrow? It's like, they had a voice actor that read the actual letters Jack had sent. And I mean, it was just all of the imagery and everything was just really creepy. But as I said, there were multiple people, like quite a few people that were on the list that they were looking for, that they thought might have been Jack's. And most of them, obviously, they eventually got them off of the list. But so, of course, they insinuate that Ripper might have been a Freemason because of course he was. But
Freemason is mysterious, hence evil.
Now there is an actual legit reason for this, for why they think, oh, maybe he was a Freemason, is because the chief of police of London at the time, the head cop, he went to one of the murders.
The
head Bob. You want some spotted dick, Harry Potter? And so he went to the crime scene and found Jack had written something on the wall in the victim's blood. and apparently it said something about Freemasons. And this guy was in the Masons, so he wiped it off the wall. Yes, you heard me right. Jack the Ripper used this woman's blood to write a message on the wall that mentions Freemasons, and the Mason that was in charge of all the police wiped it off of the wall. So that's going to lead to people saying, what about the Illuminati? Just anything.
Yeah.
So did you get that, Carol? Little bitty Carol? Do you hear what
Yeah.
he said? It's like, he said none were heard to scream other than one. The assault from the knife behind is not uncommon, even today, particularly by an impotent male using the knife as the phallic symbol. Daddy, what's a phallic symbol? I mean, that's a direct quote from this. Was that he said he was probably impotent using the knife as a phallic symbol. It's like, wow. And
okay, whose theory is that? Leonard Nimoy's? I mean,
that guy was a modern day guy who was in Scotland Yard. So, they still talk about it in Scotland. It was the most famous murderers, a serial killer of all time, right?
It's their oldest cold case file.
Yes.
I dare say.
So here is their take on what who Jack the Ripper was. Okay. In Search Of has decided that, quote, the unstable Duke of Clarence, second in line to the throne, studying art in Whitechapel at the time of the crimes. He was the most likely suspect in their opinion, and that he was rumored to be going insane because of syphilis that he contracted when he was 16. Hey, little Billy, don't forget to use soap in your shower. So why the Duke? Here's the thing of it. So the Duke of Clarence was rumored to be going slowly insane. That in itself, sketchy. The Duke's personal doctor, Sir William Gull, was seen rushing along the streets of Whitechapel on nights when many of the murders occurred, far from where he lived and far from people he associated with. The Duke also matched the description that the cops were looking for, which was basically short, tall, white guy. It was like,
Wow.
and that was really a rare sight in London at the time, obviously. Jack wore a deerstalker hat and cape. Usually we think of that with like Sherlock Holmes, right? But it really Jack the Ripper was the one who did that. And the Duke was an avid hunter, so he would have those things. Jack also, of all the suspects, he was the only Freemason. And Sir William Gull, the doctor, kept a diary and medical history of the Duke's entire life. In 1970, that diary made its way to the top of the Freemasons at the time, a guy named Dr. Thomas Stoll.
Mm-hmm.
Stoll charged in a magazine called Criminologist. This is 1970. And during a BBC interview, that the Duke of Clarence was Jack the Ripper. That's what it said in the thing. 7 days later, he recanted. Within a week, he was dead. 2 days later, his son had reported that they had burned all of the files in the Jack the Ripper case. Okay, so all of these things are sus as hell, right?
And I'm just going to say this. Occam's razor.
Yes, yeah.
Where's that?
4 years later, after the final murder, the Duke died. He had been in a medical facility for years. No reason was given for his death. And, I think that's, it's pretty compelling. What am I saying? That's stupid. It was Aaron Kosminski, a Polish immigrant barber who lived in Whitechapel. You can look all that up, and that will tell you basically, nothing's 100%. They don't, you wouldn't take the evidence they have for Aaron Kosminski is his name, and take it to court and say, yes, put this guy to death 100%. There is no doubt at all. There's nobody that is a suspect that is like that. But there's DNA evidence.
All you'd have to have is somebody saying him, any trace of doubt.
Yeah. Well, DNA evidence on Kosminski, You have, even though it's 100-something years later, you have the fact that he had access, he had knowledge of anatomy, he lived in that area, he hated prostitutes, he was very vocal about it, he hated Jews, and there was some anti-Semitic stuff that had been said in the paper that when he wrote and stuff. So, it definitely looks like him. He was the last murder happened, and then not long after that, Kosminski went into a mental institution where he later died. But there were no more Jack the Ripper murders after that. So,
And no deathbed confession.
no, he was crazy. He was like legit crazy. As a matter of fact, I think he was killed in prison by another crazy person. And he was like always slapping people around. He was just a lunatic.
Well, yeah.
So that's it for Jack the Ripper, and it's very fascinating. There's many things,
And of the many takeaways that I have, I'll just leave it at this.
Yes.
If you think you have an STD such as syphilis, please get treated.
Yes.
Please.
I think the treatment that they had back then for syphilis was like to stick some rod up your pee hole and then put something in it, some kind of toxin or something. Wasn't pleasant, and this guy wouldn't have done it anyway. So
yes, but you don't want a thing like that happening. That's going to be pretty hard on your family.
Yes,
your
and everybody else's as you kill people. So
yes,
that's you can look up Jack the Ripper.
Think of your family.
Yeah. The ones you probably cheated on in order to get syphilis, you scumbag.
Yeah. But we digress.
So that's my last take. You have your last episode. So before we leave, before we get off the subject here of In Search of and how great it was, I don't know about you, but I'm ready to hear what's on this thumb drive that somebody
I was about
sent me from 100
to
years
say,
ago.
like, weren't we still doing that? Oh my God. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, they sent it. I might as well do it.
Okay. Hell yeah.
You ready?
Yeah. Let's do it.
All right. Here we go. 3, 2,
Hey, I'm not
1.
really ready, actually.
Okay. Well, I'm going to do it anyway. Action.
Welcome to the writer's room, boys. I have to say that when Leonard told me that you guys were young, I didn't expect 7 years old.
It's okay, Mr. Landsberg. We may look 7, but we sound 55.
Hey, maybe that can be one of the episodes. In Search of Why 1976 Vanny Boy and Maddie Man sound like 2025 Vanny Boy and Maddie Man.
Maybe next season, if we have one.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I don't know what Leonard told your parents about what this show is.
It's about Dracula.
No.
It's about space aliens with hypnosis ray guns.
No.
It's about King Tut having magical balls to control Bigfoot's influence over the weather in Atlantis.
Why would he control Bigfoot with his nuts?
Boys, please, listen.
Yes, Mr. Landsberg.
Get Leonard on the phone.
I'll try, sir, but this is 1976 and we don't have instant worldwide communication with individuals on the go yet. Plus, Leonard told you that he was going somewhere and would be out of touch for a couple of days. Someplace that sounded like microdose? I think that may be in Texas, sir.
All right. Listen, boys, this show is going to be a serious investigation of different events within the human experience. For example, the Bermuda Triangle. According to our investigation, there's no statistical difference between the number of ships and planes going down to that area than any other well-traveled area, in spite of what people think.
Let's just say it's a testing area for spacemen. That's way more exciting.
Or gravity is different there and it sucks everything down to its watery death.
No. Listen, the show is supposed to be fact-based and educational. We want to present the truth. For example, Easter Island. A lot of people are confused by that. It's been presented as a mystery, but we know a surprising amount about Easter Island. The people who live there, the Rapa Nui, a Polynesian subgroup that still inhabit the island, made the famous stone statues and buried them to honor their kings and other important people. The statues are called Maui. The island used to have a forest which was cut down to be used to transport large stones to their final resting place, as well as for more space for the people and their farms. The Maui are partially buried, but due to the lack of trees, erosion caused the soil from the higher areas to bleed down to the statues, burying them even further. It's a fascinating look into a society which began around 400 AD and, more importantly, a warning of the dangers of deforestation.
Space aliens.
What?
Space aliens landed there, removed the trees, used advanced anti-gravity tools to plant alien statues, and left them there to confuse humans of the future.
What?
You want a successful TV show, don't you?
Well, of course.
Then come on, man, spice it up some.
Or should you say, space it up some?
No, he shouldn't. I shouldn't. Whatever. Listen, this is supposed to be an investigative show along the lines of 60 Minutes.
Okay, but that's for old people, and old people die. If you want an ever-shrinking audience, then do that. Life is true, bullcrap.
I get what you're saying, son. This is the 70s and everything is trippy, but NBC asked for an NBC version of 60 Minutes. For example, the Mayan people. Ever heard of them?
Aren't they the ones who used glass swords to cut people's heads off if they sucked at basketball?
No. Well, yes, but not like that. Not entirely. Listen, a lot of people ask, where did the Mayans come from and where did they go? Because they were one of the largest, most powerful civilizations the ancient world had ever seen, and they had a very rapid decline. But we know a lot about them. Facts about them. They started out in what is modern-day Belize around 2600 BC and started building a larger society around 750 BC. There were 10 million of them at one point. By comparison, at the same time, what is now France had a population of only a few 100,000. But due to starvation, drought, climate change, disease, and warfare, their society collapsed around 950 AD. There are warnings there for us. After the collapse, they migrated to what is now Mexico.
Boring.
Absolutely.
You little bat. You find that boring? A civilization that survived for over 3,500 years?
You realize that we landed on the moon 6 years ago, right?
Of course.
Supposedly.
What? What's that supposed?
You just don't get it. Nobody cares about that truth crap anymore. Sure, you can put some truth in it, just enough to be able to say, this is informative, but you gotta spice it up with werewolves and Dracula and laser guns and aliens and panther people and stuff. Otherwise, it's boring.
Take Jack the Ripper, for example. He was real, right?
Yes.
He was spooky, right?
Yeah, I guess.
He was probably someone who lived in the area where he killed, right? Where people barely scrape by and women pimp themselves out for a loaf of bread, most likely never seeing anyone who made more than $3 a year, right?
That would make some sense, yeah.
Wrong. It was the second in line for the royal crown of England.
Come on, that's ridiculous. That guy was probably never alone, watched constantly, surrounded by people who protected him from others and himself, and also people who would rat him out to the queen. In order for him to be Jack the Ripper, he'd have to have a servant get him a carriage that didn't look like it was worth $1 million, go to Whitechapel, kill without being seen, head back to the palace, coated in blood, and hope that the 40 people who helped him or saw him wouldn't say anything to the press, or worse, to the queen. It's just not possible.
Not if he was a vampire and can turn himself into a bat.
Oh, for fuck's sake.
Prove it's not true.
You can't prove something to be false if it never existed.
Now you're getting it.
What about the Lindbergh baby?
What about him?
Lindbergh was very famous, right?
He still is.
His baby was kidnapped from their home and later found dead, and they didn't know who did it, right?
Well, Bruno Hoffman was executed for the crime, but he always said he didn't do it. There are definitely a lot of irregularities and suspicions for that case. It certainly seemed to be an inside job. The house that he was kidnapped in was still under construction. Very few people knew that they were there at the time of the kidnapping. Hoffman was German. People hated Germans at the time. The letter sent by the kidnappers was written in English with some German words. However, the way it was written was by someone who was clearly not fluent in German. The nanny committed suicide not long after. The butler died mysteriously only a year.
Lindbergh did it.
What? Well, that was one of the
Limburg did it and was later traveling on a train where he was murdered by 12 people, all related to the case in some way. Each who got to stab his already dead body. Each stab varied in depth, indicating that there was more than one person. Each person had different strengths and held the knife in a different...
That's the plot of Murder on the Orient Express.
So, that whole plot was based off of the kidnapping.
Yes, but it's fiction.
It's fiction that has sold over 2 billion copies worldwide.
Right, but it's fiction.
Fiction, but fascinating.
If only 1% of the people who bought that book are drawn to your show, that's 20 million people. That's pretty big.
And you could say in the credits that the ideas presented in the show may not be the only possible explanations. You can get away with anything that way.
I never thought of it that way.
That's why Leonard Nimoy, the greatest actor of his generation, bade you to bring us in.
Huh?
Yes, Leonard Nimoy is a genius without peer. He's the Albert Einstein of Jews.
Einstein was the Einstein of Jews.
He's stronger and better looking than William Shatner.
Is there someone in that closet?
He let Columbo win in that episode.
His version of Bilbo Baggins should have been a #1 hit.
Whoever's in that closet, come out. I can hear you whispering.
Leonard Nimoy is hung like a bear.
Like a black bear, if you get my drift.
I've got a gun. Come out.
Sorry, Alan. I'll forever be known as the logic-spewing, pointy-eared freak, Mr. Spock, if I don't change my career. What better way than hosting a show with nearly zero logic? Sorry about these kids, but I needed the help of someone simple-minded and easy to control to help convince you to do things my way. And the mind bullets I used for hypnosis worked well on these adults.
Well, your plan worked. We'll do it your way. Now pull your pants up.
Aye, Captain.
Oh,
Oh my, jeez.
Oh.
What the hell? I mean, another repressed memory.
that was us, for sure.
But how does it keep happening?
I don't know. Hey, maybe we need some hypnotists to come in and tell us how that happened. 'Cause we missed out on
Gotta
something.
be a way.
I mean, we were kids. I don't even remember meeting Spock. I would have been like super excited about that. I don't know, man.
Yeah, and you know, and I would have definitely recognized or had etched in my brain that brown plaid jacket.
Yeah,
Jeez,
I know.
nothing. It did not register even now after seeing
The helmet
hearing-
hair, the smell of Pall Malls,
whatever, everything, the imagery it conjured up it for me.
Wow. So I can't, it just blows my mind. But anyway, on that crazy revelation we have there, my last words on In Search Of, and Maddie can follow up with his after this, is that it was amazing for its time. It really was. We didn't have what you have now, what we have now, which is go online and just like, oh, I want to find out about who made the car from Dukes of
Somebody
Hazzard.
could make a better produced hour-long documentary just on their own.
And they do it. I've seen some of the ones on Jack the Ripper that they make that are very compelling, not ridiculous, based on science and timing. And it's just that we know so much more about so much more of these things. And we have such better, highly produced things that just dude in his basement did that you can find by the thousands on YouTube right now.
But how it impacts Generation X, I think, just made us more broad-minded in a way. To think, oh, all these things that man doesn't understand is right out there.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe it set us up for a world of disappointment because ain't none of that stuff happening.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think that when I look back on my childhood, I have very fond memories of watching many of these. Obviously, I didn't see them all. Some of them I would find boring and wasn't interested in, but certainly Jack the Ripper was cool, you know. And I do remember the Dracula one and stuff. So, but it was just yet another thing that we would watch on a Sunday night, and then on Monday go into school and be like, "Oh man, did you watch that In Search Of about haunted castles last night?" You know, it's just another thing we all had in common.
Yeah, and to this day, honestly, even though I was just going off on the monsters there, but part of me still wants one day so much for there to actually turn out to be a Nessie.
It would be cool if Nessie was real.
Because I mean, that one for me, I just really loved that concept and the idea that, or any of these sea monsters or whatever, it would be nice for anywhere for them to find some large species.
Yeah.
And then be like, that's what it was, you know. And now that the only specimen is now found here, that would be so cool to me. But you know, they've gone through Loch Ness,
Yeah.
they've scanned it top to bottom.
Fine
Nothing
tooth
like
comb.
that is
Yeah.
not there.
No, I mean, but you know, they have found giant squid and stuff in the ocean, and they're not quite what you see in the sailors' descriptions of them, but they are massive, dangerous squid and stuff, and they turned out to be real. So who knows? I do think that
Release the Kraken.
yes, I do think that Nessie is something that could be possible. I don't think Bigfoot is possible. I mean, I don't think Bigfoot is. What I think Bigfoot is a memory that was passed around through oral history by the American Indians. Probably saw either the giant sloth that used to be in North America in the Ice Age, or it could have been some Neanderthals left over. Who knows? And they just remember that, and they passed that along, and that eventually through time became this friendly monster that lived in the woods. And then when white man came, he had his own take of it. And I think that was just a made up myth that passed along. Nessie, if they hadn't done so much research on it, I would say, like you, it'd be cool. I would really like it to be true, but I don't think at this point there's any evidence
No.
short of finding the thing.
For whatever reason, though, I always felt like that would be such a cool one because, I don't know, there's some of the oldest life, of
Right.
species that's in the water, in the ocean.
Yeah.
And you like to think that. But anywho. And also, Williamsburg, we got, we had the Loch Ness Monster roller coaster. That was the best.
Yes, they still have it, and I still love it.
Yeah. And I think they just did a refresh of it or revamped it or renovated it or something.
I hope they put rockets on the back of it. That'd be cool.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Loch Ness Monster, at least when you make him look like he's a dragon coming out of the water, which I know would be totally not what it would be.
Yeah.
But when you see that imagery, like, can that be any more badass metal
Hells yeah,
imagery
man.
there on the side of somebody's van?
In the 70s.
Jesus. Oh, yeah. Yeah. One side's got that, and the other side's got the Frank Frazetta Molly Hatchet album.
Right. Yeah.
On the side. Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
All right. So on that
Yeah.
note, folks, I would say if you're a Gen Xer, go back and watch some of these. They're on YouTube. They're entertaining. They're neat. They're kind of, they won't scare you like they did. Some of them are better than others, but
yeah, they're good, and they're not too long.
No, 30 minutes long, which, minus
just half your lunch, just watch one of those and be like, man, I'm glad Maddie Man and Vanny Boy suggested this because now I don't want to eat my lunch that I brought in from last night.
Why did I decide to eat liver and watch the one on Jack the Ripper? Oh, it's terrible. Funny. So
you'll lose some weight and you'll feel better.
Yeah. Anyway, all right, folks, we will see you next time with some other Gen X-centric thing that we're going to talk about forever. And until then, he's been Maddie Man.
And he's forevermore Vanny Boy.
See you later.
Adios.
In search of the mysteries of man and the earth, as presented by Leonard Nimoy at a time of rebirth for our world, past the age of Aquarius into the realm of science, hurled from superstition beyond cave art. Unless it tells of ancient aliens influencing the civilization of man. And the Nazca lines speak of transition to understanding what we could history. Leonard's surname is confusing because the stress comes on either the first or second syllable. Which way did he say it? I did an impression of him. Was it wrong or right? But that's not half as confusing as the 23 Bigfoot movies in the 70s. Which one am I watching? Only the heart, and maybe this show can tell you the truth about Nessie and aliens. Life after death, cryogenics, or spoon bending. It's mind-bedding. Get it? MADMAN didn't think there was a lot of to-do about Jesse James, so he skipped that one. On a side note, what rhymes with James? The River Thames? No, not right. No, not right. Dawn, I can't make this song rhyme, but back to the song. He was confused enough. His brain was done. Vanny Boy was freaked out and had nightmares at night. And sometimes during the day, the kind where he balled up in fright with his childhood blanket and a thumb. Which one? Didn't matter. Was it even his thumb? Leonard Nimoy looks like he's aged 20 years since Star Trek appeared. And that's twice as many if you do the math. So don't do the math. Just repeat to yourself, it's just a show. I should really just calm down. There's no trademark issue here, Joel. In search of Leonard Nimoy. 70s, oh yes, the 70s and the early 80s. The part that was so early it didn't have its own style yet. It's warmed over 70s, the 70s, in the 70s, sing it now, the 70s, the 70s.